All right, what's up, you guys? I am Luther Bravo. This is Being Trans, and today I just want to talk to you guys about passing. So, passing is basically when a trans person gets to the point in their transition where if you didn't know they were trans, you wouldn't guess that they were trans, right? So, it's when you stop visibly looking queer, or visibly looking gender nonconforming, right? You look like a typical gender conforming person, and that's what passing is. Um, there's a lot of debate about passing. If the goal should be to pass, if you shouldn't pass, if you should feel pride in whatever, whatever, whatever. One, let's break this. It's a very big topic. We're gonna break it down, right? The first thing you have to understand about being able to pass is that there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? First, your genetics, right? I am very androgynous, right? I have very androgynous features straight up and down, right? So, like, before I started hormones, because I wanted to look masculine, I was able to look masculine, right? There are some people who just have more features that we associate with masculinity, with men, and some people don't have those things. Even men might have, like, you know, big eyes, maybe not, soft jawline, things like that that we typically associate with like femininity, right? And the same thing is true for trans women as well. Like, no matter what, it's going to start. You have your genetics, and that's where we're basing everything off of, right? Two is going to be how your body then responds to hormones, and then your access to hormones, right? So if you're having inconsistent access to hormones, you're not going to be able to pass as quickly or even as fully as someone who has consistent access to hormones. When did you start hormones, right? Because, like, you go through your initial puberty, but you're constantly going through puberty throughout life, I feel, because the later you start your transition, the more your assigned gender at birth features kind of set in, right? And then it's harder to reverse that, if you will, or replace those things. I don't know how you wanna. I don't know how you want to phrase it, but it's harder down the line if you start later to pass. Not saying it's impossible. It definitely is possible. People do it all the time, but it is harder, right? The next thing is then your willingness, right? How much your willingness, and if you can afford to, right? Can you afford to change your wardrobe? Can you afford to try different haircuts? Can you, and not just monetarily, but do you have the safety to do that? Do you have the range? Do you have access to being able to explore wearing different clothes, doing your hair differently, doing your makeup differently, not doing your makeup at all, whatever it is, right? To be able to test that out enough times to get to a point where you say, what helps you pass and what doesn't help you pass, right? Do you have community of people where you could look and say, this is helping me pass, this isn't helping me pass, right? Um, and I'm talking a lot, right? It's like 3 minutes. I've been talking about different ways that you would even get to having passing as an option. And then there are some people who believe that, you know, you shouldn't want to pass. Like, you should be proud to be visibly in the middle. But the thing about that is, we shouldn't be policing anybody's transition. And then, especially because one of the biggest things about passing, right, is passing kind of happens, like, it could be intentional or it could be a byproduct, right? If you have a defined style prior to your transition, right? If you female to male, you have a defined style, you were a stud, you were butch, you were mask, whatever, and you get on hormones and you transition, and that defined style stays, right? Maybe it matures as you're obviously aging, but it's still, the key components are still there, right? At one point, you are visibly queer, and now you're not, and this is because you have access to hormones, you have access to surgeries or whatever the gender affirming care that you got that helped you pass right? But your style is still the same. So now you're passing by circumstance, right? You didn't change your style during your transition because you, the person, are still the same. But now you go from being someone who is visibly queer to someone who is not visibly queer, right? And there's a lot within that. Some people have these styles because, you know, they, like maybe they lean super far into their masculinity because they were afraid to embrace femininity or vice versa. And then they get the gender affirming care, and then it's easier to engage in activities or traits or stylings that relate to that other expression, whether it's femininity or masculinity, right? The thing is, right, no matter what, we all have to do the work to find that balance within us, no matter who you are, if you're trans or not. And passing is a choice. Like, passing is a choice, and it's also a circumstance, and it's also a byproduct. And it's not something that, you know, I don't know. I feel like the conversation within the community about passing and if it should be your goal to pass or not, I think is disingenuous. And I think it's disingenuous because there's too much centering of cis people and not a centering of what it is to be trans in real life, right? We could talk all day about, oh, if you're passing, you're centering, right, this idea of what masculinity should be or what it looks like or what the ideal is, right? But if you're just a dude that likes to climb trees and you dress like you climb trees and that was you before you had top surgery and access to tea, and it's still you now that you had top surgery and access to tea, and now you look like a cis dude that just likes to climb trees, that like that we can't, what are we talking about? What are we talking about, right? Because sometimes, and I'm not saying it's not that deep, because that is deep. That is someone staying true to themselves throughout a major transition, right? Like when you're going through this transition, so much of your perception changes. How you perceive yourself, how people are perceiving you, how you feel about how you perceive the people perceiving you. Like all of that, all of these things are changing. And if your style is staying the same, that might be a core part of you, right? It might not be your goal to pass, but you just end up passing. Okay? Right? Like, being trans is many, many, many things, right? There are non-binary people who like, some days, you know, like, they pass for the gender that they're assigned as, and sometimes they don't. Are we going to say they are more or less trans because of that? Because the reason why I want to talk about passing is because at the end of the day, if you pass or don't pass, that does in real time impact your life. That does in real time impact your livelihood, the connections you make, how people treat you, how people, if people take you seriously, if people are giving you respect, if all of these things, all of those things change just because you pass or not. And because of that, I think we should take every trans person's ability or want or access to or need to or whatever it is that, you know, pushes them to transition, to transition and then to pass actively or to not to pass. We should take that into consideration. It should always be a holistic approach, because for some people, if they don't pass, they're not safe. For some people, if they do pass, they don't feel like themselves, and then they're not safe. So who am I to make that decision for another person? You know, when every day you have to make that decision for yourself. That, I think, being trans, when you're going through the many, many, many different things about being trans and living as a trans person, how much you pass, right, ideally shouldn't be the thing that's making and breaking you, and shouldn't be the thing that is defining your transition. And it's not to say that we don't all have forms of body dysmorphia, and no matter what, as you go to relieve that body dysmorphia, you will be getting closer to an idea, the ideal for you, really. You might not always be getting closer to passing, because that's the other thing with transitioning, right? Like, you go so far away, and then you kind of just end up over here, right? Like, you start all the way at man, and you end up all the way at woman. Or you start here and you end up here, or maybe you're here, or wherever the scale goes, however the metronome, shakes out. Passing, it's a part of being trans, and it's a part of the trans identity, but the way that all of us get to passing, if we get to it at all, is completely different and honestly out of your control. Because if you say you just start, say you're very masculine presenting, you're assigned male at birth and you're very masculine presenting, and then you transition to a woman, for you to even